as we currently have for our A2 unions. And with the exception of, obviously, the right to strike is still gone. It does say, it does allow for a mayoral veto, but the idea being if there's 8 votes, there won't be a mayoral veto. Unfortunately, the veto is in the charter, and we can't eliminate that. If, for whatever reason, the Assembly does not approve the arbitrator's decision, the parties are then at impasse, and the mayor may impose the last best offer. And at impasse, the parties have the ability to go back to the table and see if they can come up with a more agreeable contract. Moving on to the end of the ordinance, on page 31, this was something I noted in our work session a couple of weeks ago, 37190, the language did not properly get changed there. We're just clarifying that if someone is to be moved in or out of a bargaining unit or from one bargaining unit to another, that is a matter of negotiation, discussion, and if the parties can't agree, it's for the Employee Relations Board to decide. That's current practice, but we're clarifying in the code. The last page, page 32, 2 important housekeeping matters. Again, I previously noted section 4. Within 180 days, the administration will forward a plan for managed competition. And again, managed competition doesn't exist in this ordinance. It simply allows for that possibility under the contracts. It keeps the contract from forbidding it. Section 3, the timelines for impasse procedures, mediation, fact-finding, arbitration, will be extended proportionately for those contracts that are coming up in 13, and that's a recognition that starting negotiations now or in the next few weeks, we're still already in those time periods that we've set. Negotiations take their own pace. They can take a week, they can take a year, and there's some allowance for that, but this is the recognition of, we're already past a few of these deadlines. And with that, I'm open to questions.
It should be noted as well that there's a new AM associated with the S version of the ordinance, and it kind of goes just step by step through the ordinance with more text and context in the explanatory portion of it.
Dan, Ms. Osander and then Ms. Roberts.
Okay. I have several. Starting on page 3. The clarification on direct fire protection services, the inclusion of EMS. Some EMS is done by volunteers currently. Would this have any implication on that current practice?
No, it would not.
All right. In the direct law enforcement language, are police record clerks not included as direct law enforcement?
They're not included in this definition, and again, this is says these operations are absolutely not subject to it. I'm not sure if police record clerks are something that could be subject to managed competition, simply because of some there's other codes and other things that come into that.
I don't know what the state code reference is. That's why I was asking.
The state code reference is really the sworn police officer's ability to arrest.
So this does not
that
include directly?
No, this definition does not.
It's certainly an unlikely candidate, I would say.
Pardon me?
Certainly that group of employees would be an unlikely candidate.
Well, yeah, I'm just wanting the language.
Yep.
There's also been, on page 7, a fair amount of confusion about if all employees are going to be getting the same benefits package. That isn't what you said verbally, but when I read this, I still don't see the clarification on that point. Is it the intent that the same plan is offered, or the same benefits are offered to everybody?
And what is included here is the same health plan, the same dental plan, life, disability, life insurance, the retirement saving plans will be standard throughout the municipality unless the union opts out. They can always go into their own.
No, that wasn't my question.
Okay.
If I'm a lifeguard am I going to be offered the same benefit package that a 20-year police officer is offered?
The programs that the municipality offers to the employees would be standardized, that from a municipal benefit program standpoint, so yes.
But implicitly, you'd believe that the city would contribute more towards a more expensive employee than a less expensive employee.
Currently, under, even today, it's based off of your eligibility, and the eligibility is set for our plans at 20 hours to be eligible.
It's not based
So
on what
it's-
job you do, it's based on your time work.
All right, so it's basically you get the same health coverage if you're a 30-year executive.
And that is how it is today.
All right, I didn't understand that.
And
Okay,
And in fact, the standardization is, we're all generally in the same health plan with the exception of a few unions that opted out. But what happens is we get locked into that contract with what the benefits are today, and then this set of deductibles is different from everybody else.
but okay, maybe, can I try one more time? In a contract, you basically say, I'm going to contribute this much towards medical, right?
Yes.
And so with one contract, you'd be contributing most likely more towards medical than you would in another contract.
Yes.
So even if you had the same plan, the first contract, those employees would see better medical coverage because there's a greater medical contribution from the city, correct?
The coverage would be the same, the contribution from the city would be different, the cost share difference.
Okay, it's our terminology is a little skewed here
Yeah.
because, okay.
But right now, I'm on the same plan that the mayor's on, that most of our unions are, although they might have a different set of deductibles. Some of our unions have a set of benefits that go back a few years, but it's very similar.
There's a large amount of confusion on that point, and I think it needs to be, everybody has to use the same language there, or we're gonna get really down a slippery slope. I have
Yes.
a bunch more, can I keep going?
You go
Okay.
through yours and then we'll go our way through.
All right, I understood previously that the administration had concerns over longevity and over performance pay and setting. But now the terminology performance step is in here, and that confuses me. Because my understanding is there has never been an objection towards steps moving up, you know, as you're in the, you move up another step as you're in the unit longer. I don't understand what performance steps are in comparison with this PIP program.
Debbie, I'll explain that to you.
Okay.
The confusion rests in that some of these performance programs in their contracts are called performance step programs.
So there's two-step programs?
Yes.
Yes, so that's the complexity here.
And
What
we've
you're-
laid out in AM specifically that the classification steps, that those are not changing whatsoever.
What you're referring
This
to
is
is an
strictly the
anniversary or a probationary step escalation from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no changes to that progression from an annual or a anniversary or a probationary increase as a step.
Okay, and going on, the next thing is, you're saying that appointment to the ERB and the mayoral veto are both covered thoroughly in charter, and so we have no ability to change that.
If I might, yeah.
Beyond the
The charter
modification.
provides that the mayor makes the selections and the assembly confirms those appointments.
Okay.
So, but nevertheless, the unions yesterday requested that they participate. One suggestion had been that the assembly appoint or makes the selection, or the unions make the selection. The best we can do under the charter
No, I
is as
see.
we're proposing here, where the unions put forth names that the mayor then chooses from, and you
Yeah.
confirm.
And as you know, we've got an ongoing difference of opinion about the mayoral veto that
Well,
I
this is-
won't bring into this discussion.
That's actually a different.
I know.
Different issue. This is just clarifying that that this action, the assembly approving the collective bargaining agreement is a legislative action that is subject to veto. This is just putting in code that language so that it clarifies what the timeline is, because the timeline, without addressing the issue up front, wasn't very clear in the code. By adding this in, it's clear that the timeline applies. So if the mayor were to veto, this assembly is still going to get time to exercise its right to override if it wants to.
Okay, all right. There's also been a fair amount of discussion about the implications of going with the Fair Labor Standards Act on overtime and leave. I'm really still unclear, based on what you've written here, if we've covered it.
I think-
I'm sorry, if you could particularly address, there was the gentleman who came up and talked about being on military leave as a firefighter. Could you address that and tell me how that would be covered in this situation?
Okay, let me split out a couple issues here, because there has been tremendous, I think, misinformation on this. The language has not changed whatsoever from the original version. And what it makes clear is overtime is going to be time and a half. Now, when you qualify for that overtime, whether there's a shift differential, whether there's a callback, whether there's a premium on a holiday or anything like that, that's still subject to the personnel rules, subject to negotiation. So we're not just taking the Fair Labor Standard Act minimum of this is all you ever have to pay. The memo from one of the union attorneys